The following is part 2 of a 5-part deep dive into the history of the Forgotten Realms. If you missed part 1, there's a link pinned in the comments and above you right about now. And to address some comments and emails I've received, yes, this entire 5-part series will be available as an extended single supercut video at the end of the series. Okay, enough chit-chat, because you know what time it is? The time of dragons. The first 5 millennia of life on this young world would see the birth, rise, and fall of the Saruk, the Batraki, and the Aeri, each holding title as the dominant empire of their time. As a new millennia turned, each of these creator races would leave only scars and trace remnants of that dominance upon the surface of Toril. However, rising from their ruin, 2 new powers would exert their influence upon the realms, a united dragonkind and the giant realm of Astoria. The giants, children of Anum the Allfather, had already established themselves as self-appointed overlords during the closing days of the Dawn Wars. Meanwhile, the dragons, convinced that anything not currently on fire probably should be, established their first great empires of impossible draconic naming conventions. Argis Thiliax claimed vast swaths of what would become the northern reaches, while Kaysen Malsevere dominated the eastern territories. Darastri Vrythica carved out southern domains, and Tharkrix Gonatix established dominion over the western lands. But the unity that allowed dragonkind to spread so far, so fast, would not last. The conflict historians would call the Draco Holy Wars erupted circa -30,000, as theological disputes among the deeply devout dragons of this age finally reached a boiling point. Unlike the solitary secular dragons of modern times, these ancient dragons were fanatical followers of a myriad of different draconic deities and dogmas, and therein lie the problem. Every dragon species of this age believed their particular deity and doctrine represented the pinnacle of draconic perfection. Gold dragons would claim that Asgaroth the World Shaper was clearly a lawful good gold dragon. While silver dragons often grudgingly accepted this notion, red dragons would become incensed at such absurdities, insisting Asgaroth was obviously an evil-aligned red dragon, and further that the metallic factions had lost their collective minds. The resulting wars nearly drove the entire dragon race to extinction. It would be the Dragonfall War of -29,500 that would become the climactic closing chapter that defined the wider Draco Holy Wars. As nearly 5 centuries of religious and philosophical conflict eroded the solidarity of dragonkind, draconic factions fell to rivalry, with each variant aligning to either the metallic or chromatic sects of Bahamut and Tiamat respectively. The growing animus would become eternally bound when followers of Zymor, later revealed to be Bahamut in disguise, killed Nagamut, the powerful chromatic general who led the first flight of dragons and loyally served the darker interests of Tiamat. What started as political assassination soon escalated into full-scale warfare between the emerging factions of what would be the dividing line of draconic good and evil. Tiamat, not to be outdone by her sibling rival, unleashed her spawn of Tiamat, abominations designed to tip the scales of war. Bahamut's response was characteristically methodical, creating the first Dragonborn, humanoid draconic knights, servants imbued with an unshakable sense of moral superiority. While the great dragon empire suffered from internal strife, the now fractured unity of all of dragonkind still had to share realm dominance with the rapidly expanding territories and influence of the giant kingdom of Astoria, a nation of titans who increasingly saw themselves as the sole dominant power of this Dawn Age era. No discussion on the time of dragons or the signature draconic war of this time period can be considered complete until we profile the other major power and opposition to dragon rule in this Dawn Age. And by talking with any scholar who specializes in the origins and history of giants, one will be quickly corrected that this era is, or at least should be, equally known as the time of giants. Long before the reigns of elves and men would carve their names into history, much of these early realms were the dominion of giants, despite the dragon-heavy lore offered by the history books. It was called the Colossal Kingdom of Astoria, once the sovereign realm of a race destined to rule, a civilization rooted in divine favor, but doomed by the hubris of gods and the inevitability of betrayal. They were the children of Anum Allfather, a mercurial god and the creator of giant kind. According to 2nd edition lore found in the resource Giantcraft, the Allfather is an ancient god rumored to be the offspring of the primordial forces of law and chaos, although much of his origin is cloudy and incomplete. Some myths say he wandered the multiverse, creating worlds and gods on a whim, which is where the official lore gives him such titles as the progenitor of worlds and the great creator. Yet there exists opposing lore found in the monster mythology text, also from 2nd edition, that posits Anum as a sleeping god whose dreams create the fundamental substance of reality that other gods then use in their own creations. It is in this alternative lore that Anum is given his most fascinating of titles, the Creator by Thought. Regardless, it is believed he was one of the first handful of gods to come to Abir Torel, arriving sometime prior to -30,000 Dale Reckoning, and soon after siring his first terrestrial sons with the primordial entity and eventual betrayer, Othea, but that is a story for another time. To honor his progeny, Anum forged his kingdom of Astoria, father's seed in the Jotun tongue, as a divine gift. He established the Ordning, a rigid social hierarchy, and the giant pantheon, and partitioned his vast kingdom amongst his many sons, each founding their own dynasty. Storm giants on the seas, cloud giants in the skies, fire giants upon the southern volcanoes, frost giants across the northern tundras, stone giants in the Earth's core, and hill giants upon its rolling plains. Under this divine mandate, Astoria thrived, its influence spreading across the realm, reaching its zenith around -28,000 DR, where the borders of the Colossal Kingdom now stretched from the Vilhan Reach in the south to the frozen northern lands entombed by the Great Glacier, and from the savage frontier in the west all the way to the distant cold lands in the east. Cloud giants built majestic cities that drifted on the winds. Fire giants forged metallic metropolises of mithril and adamantine. And the storm giants engineered mighty wonders of mechanical conveyance. The Titans competed for honor in architectural marvels, celestial calendars, and mastery over their domains. Rivalries were marked by contests of skill and craft rather than bloodletting. Astoria seemed unassailable. The Colossal Kingdom had entered its golden age, an era of peace and prosperity, the time of giants, until the dragons would make their own claim on these forgotten realms. As a new millennia dawned circa -26,000 DR, with the question of who would control this realm, dragons or giants, still left unanswered, an avatar of the dragon fire god Garrux decided to settle the matter. With a flight of red dragons behind him, Garrux led a devastating assault on a cloud giant city. This act of winged arson enraging the giants into all-out war. The 1,000-year war had begun. For the next millennium, dragons and giants turned Toril into their personal Thunderdome. The highlight of the war for most lore masters is found in the giants' creation of colossal constructs called the Vanandad, or Titan of Death in Jotun. Essentially a dragon-slaying mech eclipsing 80 feet tall and carrying a great sword that would make Zariel's fortress blush. Dragons, meanwhile, responded by doing what dragons do best, burning everything that wasn't already on fire, at least the red ones. The lore tells us the war ended 1,000 years later, right on the dot in -25,000, which in my expert opinion is perhaps why it's called the 1,000-Year War. In what was anticlimactic for both sides, the end came not through a decisive victory but mutual exhaustion. Both sides had bled themselves pale. Astoria, once stretching from the cold lands of the Vilhan Reach, now occupied only the frozen northern wastes. The Dragon Kingdoms fared no better as their empires lay in similar ruin, and even worse, the unity that propelled them to realm dominance in the first place was now forever fractured. Over time, draconic philosophers across all factions came to the conclusion that gods who encouraged such wasteful fratricidal warfare were no longer worthy of their worship. This realization, combined with their near extinction from the 1,000-Year War, led the vast majority of the now fractured alliance of dragons to abandon religion entirely. This distaste for the mechanics of organized war going so far as to develop a strategic war game designed to replace such large-scale battles. The game was called Zorvental, and while it is often written to exist as a more complex analog to chess, the truth is the concepts and rules of Zorvental lay beyond the comprehension of most humans. Unfortunately, despite their invention of a draconic version of Risk, the damage was already done. The age of unified dragon empires was over, and the stage was set for smaller, hungrier powers to claim their place in the sun. Dragon unity had vanished, their empires a distant memory, and the now solitary dragons of the realms licking their wounds from the Thousand-Year War. No one would argue this was a rough millennia for dragonkind, but their troubles were far from over. It was circa negative 25,000 Dale Reckoning when a crimson comet streaked across the Faerunian sky, and all hell broke loose. Enter the King-Killer Star. Star, comet, or celestial object if you prefer. Whatever its form, the appearance of the red-tailed harbinger of madness punched all of dragonkind directly in the frontal lobe, triggering the Draco Rage, a magical psychosis filling the dragon's mind with insatiable bloodlust and transforming each into a rampaging murder machine. Good, evil, metallic, or chromatic, no dragon was spared, zero discrimination. The minds of even the most genius of their species now reduced to the most primal instinct of a savage apex predator. There was no control, just frothing mauls, elemental breath weapons, and lots of screaming. And it was here that the elves enter the Faerunian history books. Recent migrants to the realm themselves found opportunity to make their first big move, leveraging this draconic vulnerability into strategic brilliance. It would be circa negative 24,000 when, having already witnessed the devastating effects of the comet's Draco Rage, the elven high mages would craft an artifact called the Draco Rage Mythal, its effects designed to undermine and restrict draconic dominance. But the genius would be found in its targeting. The Mythal didn't prevent the rage, it made it predictable and geographically amplified. Every time the King-Killer Star returned, the magical field, spanning roughly 250,000 square miles, would activate across all of Faerun. Dragons caught within this zone faced an inevitable choice: flee the area or succumb to the frenzied rage and bloodlust psychosis that would turn them against their own kind. The strategic impact was devastating. No longer could dragons maintain unified territories or coordinated armies when periodic cosmic events forced mass migrations or fratricide. The Mythal effectively shattered draconic civilization, enabling elves and other humanoid races to displace dragonkind as the dominant power of the realms. The Draco Rage Mythal continued to harass dragons for millennia to come until its destruction in 1373 Dale Reckoning. Still, its legacy is undeniable. After untold cycles of carnage, the elven artifact has left a forever mark in dragon-elven relations, one that is still witnessed today. One of the more fascinating and obscure of lore facets related to the dragon histories of the Dawn Age is actually found in the storied tales of the Stout Folk, and starts with a tradition known as the Dragon Moot, a ritual custom of courage that firmly holds heroic status in dwarven lore and is well documented in the 3rd edition text found in the Dragons of Faerun resource. This proud ritual of ceremonial hunt has seen its use wane in the modern era, but its glories evoking the era of dwarven fortitude and communal spirit can still be heard in story and song as dwarves empty their ale tankards. Similar to a medieval form of NATO, dragon moots were called only in the gravest of circumstance, whenever a dragon emerged in a region and offered too great a threat to be left alone any longer, yet was too powerful for a clan to risk tackling alone. The draconic risk posed by such powerful creatures was ample reason for even the most proud, insular, or even fractured clans to put aside their grievances in order to join together against a common enemy. The need for unity in the face of a dragon was well understood among all in dwarven culture, each understanding that no single clan would lightly choose to confront an ancient worm on its own, risking devastation or even annihilation of their home and kin. The call for a dragon moot was undertaken by messenger dwarves who would travel from hold to share the news of a dragon's presence and invite others to join in on the hunt. Those answering the call would marshal their most tested warriors to lead the attack, its ranks filled with the frightened strength of young dwarves wanting to prove themselves worthy, those skilled in the arts of magic and bolstered by the axes of storied veterans seeking one last chance at glory and a desire to die a good death in battle. The gathering itself was as much diplomatic assembly as any call to battle. Great feasts were held, trade agreements were made, and alliances grew stronger. The lore even offers that the occasional negotiation of marriage contracts between clans were not uncommon, each ceremony an expected custom of a dragon moot. The inclusion of these rituals really reflecting the dwarven reverence for tradition, as well as highlighting the importance of building bonded relations and fostering a unified posture, even in the face of a political dispute or a rival clan. All dragon moot decisions were arrived at by consensus. The leaders of each clan debated strategy and tactics, discussed risks, and of course the conflict rewards, namely how the horde of slain dragons would be divided. While this assumption of victory may reflect as both bad karma and stubborn arrogance, the histories do confirm that these coordinated dragon moots, more often than not, ended in dwarven triumph. The lore tells us the battles that followed were a true test of dwarven unity and courage as warriors faced off against dragons whose depredations could lay waste to an entire mountain. Success in a dragon moot became the stuff of legend, its tale retold through generations as a touchstone of dwarven heroism and their proud bloodline. However, even as the dwarves honored this tradition, it gradually faded from common practice over the coming centuries. Declining populations from other conflicts, specifically with the Dark Elf Drow, meant fewer warriors to spare for such rituals. As time moved into the more modern eras, dragon moots were mostly remembered in story and song, carried out only rarely when circumstances were truly dire. Still, through victories and losses, the legacy of the dragon moot remains as a strong tribute to valor and the enduring bonds of dwarven kinship found in the face of communal adversity. And that concludes part 2 of our dive into the full history of the Forgotten Realms. 2 down, 3 to go. Next in part 3, we will step into the era of Elven dominance. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, please consider taking those few seconds to like, subscribe, and enable notifications. And if you'd really like to champion smaller channels like mine that provide content you enjoy, the YouTube Hype feature is a powerful new tool to do so. Finally, a sincere thank you to my patrons and channel members who make this content possible. And thank you for watching. I hope you will join me for part 3. Until then, take care, my friends.